"We'll handle the Vanguard meeting," Julian said, pulling the scale model away from me like I had been caught touching something expensive. I looked at his hand on the base of my tower. 8 months of sketches, 14 structural studies, 3 weeks of sleeping under my desk, my concept, my diagrams, my ribbon system. And now he was carrying it into the biggest client pitch our firm had ever seen without me. "You're brilliant, Elena," he said, smiling like that made it generous. "But this is a partner-level room." Then he walked into the conference room with Celeste Rowe beside him, taking my Skyscraper design with him. They did not even change the file names. They only removed my name. And sometime after I was sent back to my desk, they removed something else too. The bronze ribbon wrapping around the tower. The part Julian thought made the building look too soft, too feminine, too much like a scarf. The part he did not understand was holding the entire tower together. 10 minutes into the meeting, Vanguard Meridian structural consultant looked at the screen and asked one simple question. "What keeps this building from twisting in the wind?" Julian smiled. Then he froze. Because he had stolen my design, but he had not understood it. And when the engineer finally said, "As presented, this tower is not structurally viable," Julian looked through the glass wall, found me sitting outside the room, and for the first time all morning, remembered my name. Before I tell you what happened when I walked into that room, take a second to like this video and subscribe if you've ever watched someone take credit for your work, only to fall apart the moment they had to explain it. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from, because I want to know how many people have had their name erased from something they built. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Elena Voss. I am 34 years old, and for most of my life I believed buildings were more honest than people. I grew up in Cleveland in a house where nobody used words like architecture, design language, or structural expression. My father was a mechanic. My mother taught 5th grade. Our house had a leaking roof, a kitchen table with old burn marks, and a garage full of tools I was not supposed to touch, but always did. When I was 9, my father found me sitting on the garage floor with cardboard, duct tape, a ruler, and 2 paint cans. I had built a bridge between the cans and was trying to figure out why it sagged when I put a brick on it. He did not laugh at me. He pulled up a stool, took the brick off the bridge, and said, "You made it pretty, kiddo. Now I'll make it hold." That sentence shaped my entire life. Most people think beauty and strength are separate things. They think beauty's surface and strength is hidden somewhere behind it. But I never believed that. I believed the best designs were the ones where the beauty was the structure, where the curve existed because the forces demanded it, where elegance was not decoration but evidence that the building understood itself. That obsession carried me through architecture school at Columbia, then through a structural engineering master's program at MIT. I was not the loudest person in every room. I did not have that effortless confidence some architects seem to be born with, the kind that lets them say obvious things in expensive shoes and make everyone nod. But I understood buildings. I understood that gravity does not care who has the nicest office. Wind does not care whose name is on the door. A building either has a load path or it does not. A structure either knows how to stand or it does not. That truth comforted me. People could lie. Buildings could not. By the time I joined Arden and Wexler studio in Manhattan, I had 2 degrees, 7 years of experience, and a portfolio that looked more senior than my title. Arden and Wexler was one of those architecture firms that made you feel underdressed before you even stepped into the elevator. The lobby had pale stone floors, smoked glass walls, and a receptionist who spoke softly enough to make noise feel like a personal failure. The firm was famous for expensive restraint. That was how Celeste Rowe described it during my interview. "Anyone can design a loud building," she told me, sitting across from me in a cream blazer that probably cost more than my rent. At Arden and Wexler, we designed buildings that whisper power. I should have heard the warning in that sentence. Celeste was the design director, elegant, precise, and terrifyingly calm. She never raised her voice because she never had to. She could destroy 3 weeks of your work with a tilted head and 1 sentence. I'm not convinced this understands the client. Julian Wexler was different. Julian was charm with teeth. He was the surviving son of the original Wexler, the partner who smiled in magazine profiles and said things like architecture is civic memory, then forgot the names of interns who slept under their desks to make his deadlines. He was in his late 40s, handsome in that polished, expensive way, with gray at his temples and a talent for making other people's ideas sound like thoughts he had just had. The first few months I thought I was lucky. I was assigned competition teams, concept studies, feasibility packages, and early-stage design proposals. I was not the loudest person in the studio, but I worked harder than almost anyone. I could sketch a concept, build a digital model, run preliminary structural assumptions, and sit with engineers without embarrassing the architects. That made me useful. Useful is a dangerous thing to be in an office like that. Useful gets you more work. It does not always get you credit. At first, the little erasures were easy to explain away. Julian would present a massing study I had built over a weekend and say, "We explored this direction." Celeste would forward my diagrams to a client and write, "Our team developed this approach." My name stayed in the file history, but not in the room. I told myself that was normal. I told myself everyone had to prove themselves. I told myself my time would come. Then Vanguard Meridian Capital walked in. Vanguard Meridian was not just another developer. They were the kind of firm that did not simply buy buildings. They reshaped skylines. They owned hotels, office towers, residential landmarks, and waterfront districts with names that sounded like private schools. When their chairman, Nathaniel Cross, announced that Vanguard Meridian was looking for a signature tower on Manhattan's west side, every architecture firm in the city heard the same thing. A billion-dollar project. A skyline-defining commission. A chance to become the firm everyone else would study for the next decade. The site was difficult. That was the polite word. It sat near the Hudson, exposed to wind, squeezed between transit infrastructure and a protected view corridor. The client wanted a slender mixed-use tower with luxury residences, a hotel component, a public cultural atrium, and sky gardens cut through the upper floors. They wanted height, drama, lightness, elegance, and minimal disruption to the street below. In other words, they wanted a miracle. For the first 2 weeks, our studio produced exactly what you would expect: sleek glass boxes, stepped towers, expensive rectangles with terraces. They were competent. They were safe. They were also dead on arrival. Celeste hated all of them. Julian pretended not to, but I could see it in the way he tapped his pen against his notebook during reviews. One night, after everyone else had gone home, I stayed at my desk with the site model open on one screen and wind studies on the other. The Hudson corridor created a brutal lateral condition. A normal tower could work if it was heavier, wider, and less ambitious. But Vanguard Meridian did not want normal. They wanted something that looked like it had been pulled upward by light. I started sketching a tower that rotated as it rose. Not dramatically enough to feel like a gimmick, but enough to open views and reduce direct wind impact. The floor plates shifted subtly. 3 sky atriums cut through the building, not as random voids, but as pressure relief zones and public spaces. The problem was torsion. The tower wanted to twist. The reinforced concrete core could do some of the work, but not all of it. Not without becoming massive, ugly, and financially stupid. The structure needed a way to carry wind load around the atriums and tie the perimeter back into the core without killing the elegance of the design. So I drew the ribbon. At first, it was just a line in pencil, a continuous bronze band wrapping around the tower, not evenly, not decoratively, but where the forces needed it. I traced it again and again until it became a system. The ribbon would be the visible outer edge of a concealed diagrid spine, tied into outrigger floors at 3 mechanical levels. It would connect the perimeter megacolumns back to the reinforced core. It would control torsion. It would make the tower look softer while making it stronger. The next morning, I showed the concept to Raj Patel, one of the structural consultants we worked with regularly. Raj was not officially assigned to the Vanguard Meridian pursuit yet, but he owed me a favor from a museum competition where I had caught a coordination issue before it became a public embarrassment. He looked at my sketches for a long time, then he said, "This is either insane or very smart." That is not helpful, I said. He leaned closer. The ribbon is doing lateral work. The visible part of it, yes, I said. The actual spine sits behind the facade line and ties into the mechanical floors. And the atriums, they work around the spine. The tower is built around that path. Raj nodded slowly. Run the first assumptions. If the numbers behave, you might have something. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I built the model. I ran preliminary lateral studies. I coordinated with Raj after hours. I refined the atriums, the core, the outrigger zones, the facade geometry, the transfer levels. I made the ribbon thinner, then thicker, then thinner again. I changed its profile so it looked like a bronze veil caught in wind, soft from a distance and precise up close. When I finally presented it internally, the room went quiet. That kind of quiet can mean death or birth. Julian stood at the end of the table with his arms crossed, staring at the render. Celeste leaned forward. Someone from interiors whispered, "Oh my God!" I walked them through the concept carefully. I explained the site, the wind, the rotation, the atriums, the public experience, and the structural logic. I did not call the ribbon decoration. I did not present it as an aesthetic flourish. I made it clear from the beginning that it was the visible edge of the lateral system. The tower is called the veil, I said. The ribbon is not applied to it. The tower is organized around it. It is both the identity and the spine. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Julian smiled. That was the first time I should have been afraid. He said, "Now that is a building." For the next 3 months, the Veil Tower consumed my life. I missed dinners, birthdays, dentist appointments, and the last weekend of a relationship that had already been dying, but probably deserved a better goodbye than me saying, "I can't talk right now. I have to fix a structural diagram." I lived on coffee, protein bars, and the kind of adrenaline that makes you feel brilliant right before it makes you sick. Celeste became more involved as the concept gained traction. She edited the language. Julian shaped the client narrative. The visualization team polished the renders until the tower looked like something out of an impossible future. But the bones were mine. The first sketch was mine. The ribbon was mine. The reason it stood was mine. At least I thought everyone understood that. The first warning came during a Friday design review. Julian stood in front of the main render for a long time, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "It's beautiful," he said. Nobody moved, because in rooms like that, beautiful is not always praise. Then he added, "But it may be reading a little soft." Celeste tilted her head. "In what sense?" "The bronze wrap," Julian said. "The line around the tower, it's elegant, yes, but Vanguard Meridian is conservative money. They want iconic, not delicate." I felt my shoulders tighten. "It is not just a line," I said. "It is part of the lateral system." Julian glanced at me with the kind of patience that feels more insulting than anger. "I know what you said it does, Elena." "What you said it does?" As if structure was an opinion. Raj was not in that meeting. The engineering memo was not on the table. The room was full of designers, visualization people, and partners who cared more about how the building read than how it stood. Celeste said, "Maybe there is a way to make the exterior expression quieter without losing the concept." Quieter. That was how people like Celeste killed things. They did not destroy them. They quieted them until nothing vital remained. I said, "We can adjust the material expression, but the system itself cannot disappear. The tower is designed around it." Julian waved a hand. "No one is talking about making anything disappear. We are discussing presentation." I wanted to believe him. That was my mistake. A week before the final Vanguard Meridian presentation, Julian came to my desk with his friendly face on. "Elena," he said, "you have done excellent work on this." That phrase is almost always followed by theft. But Nathaniel Cross will be in the room, along with Vanguard's board and their technical consultants. This is a partner-level pitch. I looked up from my model. I should be there for the structural concept. Raj's preliminary memo is included. Raj's memo supports my design. It does not explain it. Julian smiled. "Celeste and I can handle the narrative." "The ribbon system is not just narrative." "Elena," he said, lowering his voice, "do not make this difficult. That was when I knew. Not that he would remove the ribbon. I did not know that yet. But I knew he had already decided the work could go into the room without the person who made it. I am not asking to lead the pitch, I said. I am asking to be in the room if technical questions come up. His face cooled slightly. That will not be necessary. Then he walked away. 2 nights before the presentation, I stayed until nearly midnight finishing the structural appendix and cleaning up the original diagrams. I put everything in the project folder. The ribbon logic, the outrigger levels, the atrium coordination, the preliminary drift assumptions, Raj's notes, my sketches, the section diagrams, and the full render package. I went home exhausted, angry, and still stupid enough to think the design will be presented as I had delivered it. What I did not know was that after I left, Julian stayed behind with Celeste and the visualization team. I learned the details later from a junior designer named Noah, the one who had spent 3 months exporting my diagrams at 2 in the morning and pretending not to notice how often my name disappeared from meetings. According to Noah, Julian stood in front of the final tower render and pointed at the bronze ribbon twisting around the glass. He said, "Lose that." Noah hesitated. "The ribbon?" Julian laughed. "Yes, the ribbon. The scarf. Whatever Elena is calling it this week." Celeste did not laugh, but she did not stop him. She only said, "The client may respond better to a cleaner exterior." Julian nodded. "Exactly. Vanguard Meridian is not paying us $1 billion for a glass ballerina." Someone in the room laughed. Then they removed it. Not from a real building, because there was no real building yet, but from the client deck, the main render, the simplified section, the animation, and the one diagram that would have made the lateral strategy clear enough for a structural engineer to recognize. By morning, the Veil Tower still looked beautiful. It just no longer worked. Presentation day arrived with a kind of artificial calm that only exists before disaster. Everyone in the studio dressed better than usual. Assistants carried coffee into conference rooms. Partners spoke in low voices. The model room smelled like fresh foam board and expensive anxiety. I arrived early because I could not stay away. The Veil was still my building, even if they had decided I was not senior enough to sit beside it. Vanguard Meridian's team arrived at 10. I saw them from my desk through the glass wall of the main conference room. Nathaniel Cross was taller than I expected, silver-haired, composed, with the kind of stillness that made other people perform around him. Beside him walked Evelyn Hart, Vanguard's project director, sharp-eyed and unsmiling. Then came the person I noticed most, Dr. Mara Keene, their independent structural consultant. I knew her name. Everyone in high-rise design knew her name. Mara Keene had written papers on wind behavior in slender towers. She had consulted on projects in Chicago, Singapore, Dubai, and New York. She was the kind of engineer who could make a room full of architects suddenly remember physics. When I saw her, I felt a small flicker of hope. If anyone would understand the structural logic of the Veil, it would be her. Then the conference room door closed. I returned to my desk, opened a coordination file, and tried to work while my future happened 30 feet away without me. For the first few minutes, the presentation looked smooth. Julian stood at the front of the room with that effortless confidence clients loved. Celeste advanced the slides. Nathaniel Cross watched without expression. Evelyn Hart took notes. Mara Keene sat quietly with one hand near her chin, studying the screen more than the speaker. I could not hear much through the glass, but I knew the sequence. The city context, the waterfront challenge, the public atrium, the hotel arrival, the residences, the sky gardens, the Veil. Then Celeste clicked to the full-height tower image. Even through the glass, I saw the room soften. The tower was stunning. Slender, twisting pale glass, 3 open sky atriums cut through the body like pieces of air. For 1 second, even I felt the old pride rise in my chest. Then I leaned closer, and my blood went cold. The ribbon was gone. For a moment, I genuinely did not understand what I was seeing. The tower was still shaped like mine. The rotation was mine. The atriums were mine. The glass skin was mine. But the bronze structural band that wrapped around the tower, the line I had designed to carry lateral load around the atriums and tie the perimeter back to the core, had disappeared. The tower looked naked. Beautiful, yes. Cleaner, maybe, but wrong. Structurally wrong. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward into the file cabinet behind me. No one near me noticed. They were all pretending not to watch the big client meeting while absolutely watching the big client meeting. Inside the conference room, Julian was still speaking. I wanted to walk in right then. I wanted to open the door and say, "Stop. That is not the design." But my hand stopped on the back of my chair. Maybe they had only removed it from the hero render, I thought. Maybe the technical appendix still had the system. Maybe the structural slides were intact. Maybe if I walked in uninvited, Julian would call me unstable before anyone had a chance to realize I was right. So I stood there, hands cold, and watched. 5 minutes later, Mara Keene leaned forward. I saw it before anyone else did. She said something. Julian smiled and answered. Mara nodded once, but she did not look satisfied. She said something else. Julian's smile stayed on his face, but it changed shape. Celeste clicked back one slide. Then forward, then back again. Mara pointed at the screen. Nathaniel Cross turned his head toward her. Evelyn Hart stopped writing. Later, Noah told me what had been said in the room. But even from outside, I could read the temperature changing. Mara asked, "Mr. Wexler, can you go back to the full height render?" Julian said, "Of course." Celeste clicked back. Mara studied the tower. "I'm trying to understand the lateral strategy," she said. Julian nodded like he had expected the question. The tower uses a reinforced concrete core with perimeter columns. And of course, we would coordinate the final structure with the engineering team as the design develops. Mara did not smile. With this geometry, the core alone would be doing a tremendous amount of work. Julian's smile tightened. The core provides the primary stability. Mara pointed at the screen. The floor plates rotate as the tower rises. You have 3 major atrium voids interrupting the body. The site is exposed to waterfront wind from multiple directions. I'm not seeing what controls the torsion. Celeste stepped in. The atriums are part of the architectural identity. They create openness, light, and public space. I understand the architectural identity, Mara said calmly. I'm asking about the load path. The room went quiet. Nathaniel Cross looked from Mara to Julian. Is that a concern? Mara kept her eyes on the tower. It may be explainable, but as presented, I'm missing the structural idea that makes this form viable. Julian gave a small laugh. This is still a concept presentation, Doctor. Keene. Yes, Mara said. But even at concept level, a tower like this needs a clear lateral system. I don't need final calculations today. I need to understand what keeps it from twisting under wind load. Celeste clicked to the simplified section diagram. That was when the problem became impossible to hide. The diagram showed the core. It showed the atriums. It showed the beautiful rotating floor plates. But it did not show any clear external bracing strategy. It did not show how the perimeter tied back to the core. It did not show anything that explained how that slender, twisting glass tower survived the wind conditions of the site. Mara sat back. As presented, she said, this tower is not structurally viable. Not with this geometry. That was when Julian looked through the glass wall and found me. My phone buzzed. A message from Celeste. Conference room. Now, for 1 second, I looked at that message and felt a calm so complete, it almost frightened me. Not joy, not revenge, just clarity. They had taken my work. They had changed the part they did not understand. And now the building was telling on them. I walked into the conference room with every eye in the studio following me. 30 feet can feel like a mile when everyone knows something has gone wrong. I opened the door. Julian smiled too brightly. "Ah, Elena," he said, as if I had been part of the plan all along. Perfect timing. We were just discussing some of the structural logic behind the design. I looked at the screen. Up close, it was worse. The tower rose elegantly from the waterfront base, twisting through the atriums with no visible lateral strategy, no ribbon, no explanation for how the exterior system tied back to the core. I heard myself say, "Where is the ribbon?" The room went silent. Julian's jaw tightened. Celeste's eyes flashed a warning. "Elena," Julian said softly, "we simplified the exterior expression." I turned toward him. "You did not simplify the exterior. You removed the lateral system." "No one moved." Mara Keene leaned forward. "This ribbon you're talking about," she said, "was it part of the structure?" "Yes," I said. It was the visible edge of a concealed digrid spine, tied into outrigger floors at 3 mechanical levels. The tower's rotation, the atriums, the waterfront wind exposure, all of it was designed around that system. Mara looked back at the screen. Then she said, "That would explain what I'm not seeing." Nathaniel Cross turned to Julian. "Mr. Wexler, why was it removed?" Julian opened his mouth. For the first time since I had known him, nothing useful came out. Celeste tried to recover. The design team was exploring a cleaner exterior language for this presentation. Mara turned to her. "You cleaned away the structural idea." Julian gave another small laugh, the kind powerful men use when they need the room to pretend something is funny. "I think we are getting a little too technical for this stage." Mara did not blink. "You invited me here for the technical review." That shut him up. Nathaniel Cross leaned forward. "Miss Voss," he said, "were you the author of the original concept?" Julian started to answer for me. Mara lifted one hand slightly. He stopped. I said, "Yes." Nathaniel studied me. "And the version that explains this lateral system exists?" "Yes." "Can you show it to us?" Julian said, "I do not think that is necessary at this stage." Nathaniel did not look at him. "I do." That was the first time in my career that a powerful man used his authority to make room for me instead of remove me from it. I connected my laptop to the screen. My fingers moved automatically. Project folder, original model, structural narrative, diagrid logic, outrigger levels, wind notes, Raj's preliminary review. The original render appeared on the room screen. The room changed. The second the original Veil Tower appeared with the bronze ribbon wrapping around the glass, something settled. The eye understood what the body had been missing. The building had its spine back. Nathaniel Cross stared at it. Evelyn Hart leaned forward. Mara Keene looked almost pleased. Julian looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. I picked up a marker and went to the whiteboard. I drew the tower in less than 30 seconds. Not beautifully, not like the render. Just the essential lines: core, rotating floor plates, atriums, ribbon path, outrigger levels. "This site gets complicated wind behavior off the river," I said. "A straight tower would already need careful lateral design. But this tower is slender, and the floor plates rotate as they rise, so the wind is not only pushing it sideways, it is trying to twist it." Mara nodded. I drew the 3 mechanical levels. The ribbon is not decoration. It is the visible edge of a concealed diagrid spine. At these levels, it ties into outrigger trusses that connect back to the reinforced core. That transfers load across the perimeter and controls torsion without making the core so massive that the usable floor plates collapse. I drew arrows: wind, load, transfer, resistance. For once, nobody interrupted me. Not Julian. Not Celeste. Not anyone. I kept going. The atriums are not random voids. They are positioned around the structural path. They create the public identity of the tower, yes, but they also work with the pressure conditions and the load transfer. The structure and the experience are not separate. That was the point. Mara asked, "Do you have preliminary drift assumptions?" "Yes," I said. "They are in the original technical appendix." Julian said, too quickly, "We did not include that appendix in today's package." I looked at him. "Of course you didn't." Evelyn Hart's eyes moved to Julian. Mara asked, "Do you have access to it now?" I opened the appendix. For the next 25 minutes, I presented the real Veil Tower, not the cleaned-up version. Not the version Julian thought looked more serious. Not the version Celeste thought would whisper power. The real one. I explained the ribbon, the outrigger levels, the atrium placement, the way the public sky gardens were integrated with mechanical floors so the structure did not feel like a compromise. I explained why the bronze material was not decoration, but a way to reveal the tower's logic to the city. People should be able to look at a building and feel that it knows how to stand, I said. The ribbon gives the tower identity, but it also tells the truth. Mara asked increasingly specific questions. I answered them. Sometimes I said that would need wind-tunnel testing. Sometimes I said the preliminary model suggests this, but we would need to verify it. I did not pretend to know what I did not know. Engineers respect that more than confidence. Julian and Celeste sat in silence. They could not help because they had never understood the thing they tried to sell. When I finished, Nathaniel Cross looked at the original render on the screen, then at me. "Miss Voss," he said, "why were you not leading this presentation from the beginning?" The question hung in the air. Julian shifted in his chair. Celeste looked down at her notes. I could have softened it. I could have protected the room. I could have said something about team structure, senior leadership, collaborative process, all the little corporate phrases people use to hide ugly truths. Instead, I said, because I am not a partner. Nathaniel waited. So I added, and because the people who are partners believed they could present my work without me. Celeste said, that is not a fair characterization. Keene looked at her. Is it inaccurate? Celeste did not answer. That silence told the truth better than I ever could. The meeting ended differently than Julian had planned. Vanguard Meridian did not award the contract that day. People in movies love instant victories, but real money moves slower than justice. What Nathaniel Cross did say was that Vanguard Meridian remained interested in the Veil Tower, but only in the original concept, and only if the next phase included a direct design leadership from me and formal structural coordination with the appropriate consultants. He said it while looking at Julian, not asking, stating, Keene handed me her card before she left. Send me the full structural narrative, she said. The real one. The real one. I held that card like it weighed more than paper. After the Vanguard team left, the conference room door closed, and the three of us stood in the wreckage of Julian's confidence. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Julian turned on me. What the hell was that? I looked at him. That was the presentation you should have let me give. His face hardened. You humiliated this firm. No, I said. You removed a structural system because you thought the design looked cleaner without it. Then tried to sell the broken version to a client with one of the best structural engineers in the country sitting at the table. Celeste finally spoke. Elena, you could have handled that with more discretion. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my body needed somewhere to put the disbelief. Discretion? You erased my name, changed my design, removed the system that made it work, and called me in only after Keene noticed the building did not stand. Julian stepped closer. Careful. That single word did something to me. Careful? I had been careful for years. Careful not to sound arrogant, not to be difficult, not to correct partners too sharply, not to claim too much space, not to make powerful people uncomfortable with the truth. I was so tired of careful. I picked up my laptop. You're right, I said. I should be careful. So I am going back to my desk to document exactly what happened today. Julian's eyes narrowed. This is not over. I looked at the screen, where my original tower still stood in bronze and glass. No, I said. It finally started. By 4 that afternoon, I had an email from Human Resources. Meeting requested. Attendance required. Subject, client presentation, conduct review. Of course, that is how institutions protect themselves. Not by asking who stole the work. Not by asking who broke the design. First, they ask why the woman who noticed the fire raised her voice near the smoke alarm. The meeting was scheduled for 5:30 in the executive conference room. I had 90 minutes. I used every second. I gathered emails, sketches, file histories, model timestamps, structural notes, messages from Raj, markups with my initials, every exported version of the Veil Tower before the ribbon disappeared. I found the visualization thread from the night before the presentation. I found Celeste's comment about producing a cleaner exterior. I found Julian's reply. Less scarf? Just those 2 words. He had not even understood what he was removing. At 5:28, I walked into the executive conference room with a folder thick enough to make HR nervous. Julian was already there. Celeste sat beside him. Marion Price from HR sat with her hands folded in front of her. And at the head of the table was Gideon Arden, the other name on the door, the founder who rarely involved himself in internal drama unless a client relationship was at risk. Gideon Arden was 71, thin, sharp-eyed, and famous for saying very little until everyone else had talked themselves into a corner. "Alain," he said, "sit down." I did. Julian began before anyone asked him to. Today's presentation was compromised by an unacceptable breach of protocol. Elena interrupted a senior client meeting, contradicted firm leadership in front of Vanguard Meridian, and created the impression that our team was disorganized. I opened my folder. Marion from HR glanced at it. Gideon Arden said, "Elena?" I took one breath. Then I told the truth. I did not interrupt the presentation. I was called into the room after Vanguard Meridian structural consultant questioned the viability of the design Julian was presenting. The reason the design was not viable is that Julian and Celeste presented a modified version of my tower after removing the exterior ribbon system, which was not decorative. It was the visible edge of the lateral bracing strategy. Julian scoffed. She is overstating her role. I slid the first document across the table. That is the first concept sketch of the Veil Tower. My initials are in the corner. The date is 3 months before Julian saw the model. Then the second, that is the preliminary structural narrative I wrote after reviewing the concept with Raj Patel. Then the third, that is the internal presentation where I explained the ribbon system as a diagrid spine tied into outrigger floors. Then the fourth, that is Celeste's request to produce a cleaner exterior for the final deck. Then the fifth, that is Julian's response calling the ribbon a scarf. Gideon read in silence. Celeste had gone very still. Julian's face darkened. Marion from HR looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. I continued. I did not embarrass the firm by telling the truth. The firm embarrassed itself by letting 2 senior leaders present a structurally altered version of a design they did not understand. Julian tapped the table with 2 fingers. This is insubordination. No, I said. This is attribution. Gideon looked up. That word mattered to him. I could tell. He turned to Celeste. Did you know the ribbon had structural purpose? Celeste's answer came too slowly. I understood that Elena considered it important. That is not what I asked. She swallowed. Yes, I understood it was connected to the structural concept. Gideon turned to Julian. And you removed it. Julian adjusted his cuff. We refined the visual expression for the client. Gideon held up Julian's own comment. Less scarf. Julian said nothing. I almost smiled. Almost. Then Marion's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, hesitated, and said, "Gideon, Vanguard Meridian just sent a follow-up." The room went quiet. "Read it," Gideon said. Marion cleared her throat. "Thank you for today's presentation. Vanguard Meridian remains interested in pursuing the Veil Tower concept in its original structural and architectural form. For any further discussions, we request that Elena Voss be present as lead design architect with direct access to structural coordination. We are not interested in proceeding with a version of the project that separates the architectural identity from the lateral system." She stopped. No one breathed. Then she added, "It is signed by Nathaniel Cross." Julian looked like he had been slapped without anyone touching him. Gideon folded the email printout slowly. "Elena," he said, "step outside for a moment." I did. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, folder pressed against my chest, staring at a framed photograph of a museum the firm had designed before I was old enough to drive. Behind the glass wall, I could see shadows moving. Julian speaking. Celeste sitting motionless. Gideon leaning back. I thought I might be fired. I really did. People think truth protects you immediately. It does not. Truth is powerful, but power has office politics, legal departments, and a talent for punishing the person who made the truth inconvenient. After 15 minutes, Marion opened the door. "Come back in." Julian was gone. Celeste was still there, but she looked smaller somehow, as if someone had reduced the lighting around her. Gideon gestured for me to sit. "What happened today," he said, "was unacceptable." I braced myself. He continued, "Not your conduct. Theirs." I looked up. He tapped the folder. "You will lead the Vale Tower pursuit from this point forward. If Vanguard Meridian proceeds, you will be named lead design architect in the proposal. Raj Patel will be formally brought on for structural coordination. Celeste will remain involved only in an advisory capacity. Julian will not present this project again." Celeste's face tightened, but she said nothing. I heard myself ask, "And my position?" Gideon studied me. "What do you think it should be?" 6 months earlier, I would have said something safe. I would have said I was grateful for the opportunity. I would have said I wanted to keep contributing. I would have made myself smaller so nobody could accuse me of grabbing too much. But something had changed in that conference room. Maybe it was the look on Julian's face when the building failed without me. Maybe it was the way Mara Keene said the real one. Maybe it was years of being careful finally becoming heavier than the risk of being honest. I said, "Associate Design Director. Written project credit. Compensation tied to the Vanguard Meridian contract if we win it. And a policy requiring named attribution for lead concept authors in all major pursuits." Marion blinked. Celeste looked at me like I had asked to buy the moon. Gideon did not blink. "That is a significant ask." "Yes," I said. "It is." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Put it in writing." That night I did not sleep. Not because I was working. Because for the first time in years, I was imagining a future where I did not have to disappear inside my own accomplishments. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Julian did not speak to me unless witnesses were present. When he passed my desk, he looked through me with the cold politeness of a man trying not to leave fingerprints on his anger. Rumors spread through the studio in predictable versions. Some people said I had saved the Vanguard pitch. Some said I had ambushed Julian. Some said I was brilliant. Some said I was dangerous. Dangerous. That word follows women who stop being convenient. Raj officially joined the project and brought 2 engineers from his firm into the coordination process. When he saw the cleaned-up render without the ribbon, he stared at it for 3 full seconds before saying, "Well, that is one way to make gravity angry." I laughed for the first time in days. "You should have seen Mara Keene's face," I said. "I wish I had," he replied. Then he grew serious. "Elena, you know they will try to take this back if they can." "I know. So document everything." "I am." He nodded. "Good. Because the building may stand, but offices are held together with weaker materials." He was right. Celeste requested a private meeting 3 days later. I knew better than to go alone, so I asked Marion from HR to join us. Celeste did not appreciate that. We met in a small glass room overlooking the studio. Celeste sat across from me, hands folded, face composed. "I want to clear the air," she said. I waited. She sighed softly. "I should have advocated for you to be in the Vanguard presentation." "Yes," I said. "You should have." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. I was navigating a complicated partner dynamic. You were protecting Julian. I was protecting the project. "No," I said. "You were protecting the hierarchy. The project was protected by the thing you let him remove." Her mouth tightened. For a moment, I thought she would say something honest. Instead, she said, "You have to understand, Elena, talent is not enough at this level. There is diplomacy, timing, presentation." I looked at her, this woman who had once seemed like proof that women could survive rooms built by men, and realized she had survived by becoming a locked door for women behind her. "I understand presentation," I said. "That is why the tower looked beautiful. I understand diplomacy. That is why I did not tell Nathaniel Cross that his billion-dollar project was nearly derailed because a senior partner thought the structural system looked like a scarf. And I understand timing, Celeste." I waited until an engineer asked me a direct question before I told the truth. She looked away. There was nothing left to clear. The second Vanguard Meridian meeting happened 3 weeks later. This time, I was in the room from the beginning. Not near the wall. Not as support. At the table. My name was on the agenda. Elena Voss, lead design architect. Julian was not there. Celeste attended remotely and said very little. I presented the Veil Tower properly. Not as a pretty object. Not as a spectacle. As an integrated architectural and structural concept, I showed the skyline view, the street experience, the atriums, the hotel arrival, the residential layouts, the public garden, the night render, and yes, the ribbon. I explained how the tower's identity came from its load path. Nathaniel Cross listened. Evelyn Hart asked hard questions about cost and construction phasing. Mara Keene asked harder ones about wind tunnel testing, outrigger depths, and coordination risk. I answered what I could. I acknowledged what needed further study. I did not fake certainty. At the end, Mara said, "This is ambitious, but it is coherent." Coming from her, that was practically a love letter. 4 days later, Vanguard Meridian Capital awarded Arden and Wexler the design contract for the Veil Tower. The initial design phase alone was worth $48 million. When Gideon Arden announced it to the studio, he did something I will never forget. He did not say, "Our firm developed a landmark concept." He did not say, "Julian and Celeste led a successful pursuit." He stood in front of the entire studio and said, "The Veil Tower began with Elena Voss." Then he started clapping. For one terrible second, nobody else did. Then Raj clapped. Then someone from interiors. Then 3 junior designers near the model shop. Then the room filled with applause. Not everyone meant it. I did not care. Some recognition is still recognition, even when it has to drag resentment behind it. My promotion was announced the following Monday. Associate Design Director. Project Lead for the Veil Tower. Compensation adjustment. Contract bonus. Formal attribution policy for major pursuit work. Julian resigned 2 months later. The official email said he was leaving to explore independent opportunities. The unofficial story was that Gideon had reviewed several past projects and discovered a pattern of senior leadership presenting junior work without proper credit. Julian was not the only one guilty of it, but he had been the most careless. Or maybe just the most arrogant. Celeste stayed. For a while, she became quieter around me. Not kinder, just quieter. There is a difference. She eventually moved to another firm where I am sure she gave interviews about mentorship and design integrity. As for the Veil Tower, it did not become easy after we won. That is another thing stories simplify. Winning credit does not mean the work becomes light. If anything, the work became harder, because now I had to prove that every person who had doubted me was wrong, and every person who had believed in me was not foolish. Wind tunnel testing forced changes. The ribbon thickened at 2 levels. The atriums shifted. The hotel lobby lost a feature I loved. The sky garden gained a structural depth I initially hated, then learned to make beautiful. That is architecture. The building teaches you what your ego did not know. But through every revision, the core idea survived. The ribbon stayed. One evening, almost 6 months after the first disastrous presentation, I stood in the model room alone with the newest physical model. The bronze band curled around the tower under the lights, graceful and necessary. Gideon Arden walked in quietly. For a while, we both looked at it. Then he said, "You know, when I first saw the ribbon, I thought it was too delicate." I smiled without looking at him. A lot of people did. I was wrong. I turned to him. He kept his eyes on the model. "It is the strongest part of the building," he said. I thought about my father in the garage, removing the brick from my cardboard bridge. "You made it pretty. Now make it hold." I thought about Julian calling my structure a scarf in a markup thread. Celeste telling the team to clean the exterior. The junior designer laughing, because laughing at Power's joke felt safer than thinking for himself. I thought about every room where someone had looked at the surface of my work and mistaken elegance for weakness. Then I said, that was always the point. Months later, Mara Keene invited me to speak on a panel about integrated design in tall buildings. I almost said no. Old fear is persistent. Even after everything, some part of me still wondered if I belonged on a stage beside people whose names appeared in textbooks and engineering journals. Then Mara emailed me one sentence. "Elena, stop waiting for permission to stand beside your own work." So I went. During the panel, someone asked about the Veil Tower and whether the ribbon began as an aesthetic gesture or a structural one. I looked out at the audience and saw students, architects, engineers, developers, people taking notes, people waiting for some clean answer that separated beauty from function. I said it began as both. The best ideas usually do. Then I told him something I had not said publicly before. I spent a long time working in rooms where anything graceful was treated as less serious, anything feminine was treated as less rigorous, and anything quiet was treated as less important. The Veil taught me that sometimes the thing people dismiss as decoration is carrying more weight than they understand. The room went silent, not dead silent, listening silent, the kind of silence that means something has landed. After the panel, a young woman came up to me. She looked about 23, maybe 24, with a portfolio case over her shoulder and the exhausted eyes of someone doing studio work on vending machine dinners. She said, "I am in architecture school, and my professor keeps telling me my designs are too soft." I waited. She swallowed. "But I like soft things. I like curves. I like light. I just also want them to be strong." I smiled. "Then make them strong." Her eyes filled with tears so quickly that she looked embarrassed. I remembered being that young. I remembered wanting someone to tell me I did not have to choose between beauty and seriousness, between being graceful and being respected, between making something elegant and making something that could survive. So I said, do not let anyone convince you that softness means weakness. But also, do not let beauty be an excuse. Make it stand. She nodded. And for the first time, I understood that what happened to me was bigger than one stolen design, one arrogant boss, one ruined presentation. It was about every person who has ever been told their contribution was decorative because someone else did not understand the structure underneath it. So if you are listening to this while working late, while someone else gets credit, while your name disappears from slides, while your idea gets softened and simplified and cleaned up until it no longer resembles what you built, I need you to hear me. Document everything. Keep your originals. Know your work so well that when the room finally needs the truth, you can explain it without shaking. And do not confuse being underestimated with being powerless. Sometimes the thing they mock is the thing holding everything together. Sometimes the person they leave outside the room is the only reason the room does not collapse. And sometimes justice does not arrive as a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it sounds like an engineer looking at a stolen design and calmly saying, "As presented, this does not stand." If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Tell me in the comments if anyone has ever called your work too much, too soft, too emotional, or not serious enough, only to need it later. And if this story reminded you of a time someone tried to erase your name from something you built, subscribe, because this channel is for the people who were told to stay quiet while everyone else stood on their work.